welcome back to the channel. It's time for another Wrestle Juice Ask Me Anything. We got a bunch of great questions here in the community thread, so thanks for that. I appreciate it. I've answered a couple of these via just writing out the answers to you guys, little shorter answers here and there. We're going to start today. Well, before we start, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up and the subscribe button if you haven't already. We're going to start today with one question asked sort of in the same way by two different people, from Lil DJ Boy Axe, or AK, I think it's Axe, and who else is this? One other person asked the same question. Ethan Goldstein said, is it being overlooked how poorly Hangman is being booked? Does the shine of all the other stuff on Dynamite mask Hangman? And Lil DJ Boy says, similarly, does Hangman's championship reign feel like an afterthought? It's a tough situation to be in when you're not a major name coming over from a different company that has a high profile. When you're the guy who had such a story on his way up to where he is, and then he gets there, and we've seen this in WWE. Now, I kind of do think we're seeing it in AEW, not to the degree that we saw it before, because I thought his feud with Bryan Danielson was pretty cool. I mean, it resulted in a couple of really, really, really great matches. There was the whole bit where Bryan Danielson was beating up all the members of the Dark Order. Now he's in a thing with Lance Archer, which I love Lance Archer. He's hot coming back from injury, but before he was injured, he was sort of stuck in the mid-card. I think that Lance Archer is one of those guys that sort of got lost along the way with all the big names coming in. He sort of lost what his place could have and maybe should have been along the way. And now you've got all these big things happening. You've got Adam Cole and his story with the Young Bucks and the Undisputed Era, whatever they're going to call them at whatever point. You've got MJF and CM Punk, two voices of their generations going at it in a pretty hot feud. Mox left and is now back. He's sort of a hot thing. So there's a lot of other interesting things going on that are feuds that are sort of built from that sort of came out of All In, and they're really starting to reach ahead right now. Well, Hangman got his big moment at Full Gear, and now he's sort of trying to figure out, okay, who's the next legitimate guy to come around? I get the feeling that once he goes through this Texas death match with Lance Archer, maybe the next guy would be Mox. But now that I think about it, maybe not, because do you really want the crowd booing one of these guys? You don't want them booing Hangman. And Mox is just a babyface now because we all were there to go through what he went through, and he came back and he was all vulnerable and opened up and said that he drinks blood now, which was an awesome moment. So I think the original plan was probably for Hangman to take on Mox at some point, but that was like old Mox. I don't think that'd be the Mox now. So yeah, maybe plans had changed and they're just sort of giving him a bunch of really solid one-off title defenses, or in the case of Bryan Danielson, two-off, a bunch of solid title defenses, but no real story underneath them. And there's actually a bunch of good stories happening right now that, yes, are overshadowing his title reign. I don't think it's a major problem because I think whoever his next feud is going to be is going to start very soon. There's about 5 weeks until Revolution. And I think the match with Lance Archer is supposed to be happening a week from this coming Wednesday. So after that, he's going to need some high profile feud, like with an actual story, to last through the next 3 weeks until Revolution, I guess. But yeah, I kind of feel like it's not going to say an afterthought, but definitely he had to start from place one again. And a bunch of other people already had sort of stories that were built in, like the House of Black is still building. That's been building for a long time. And all these other things have already been building. So I think it's kind of a matter of, his placement has sort of fallen just by virtue of the fact that he's starting from scratch with his stories and the other stories are on the come up and he's not involved in like an A-level thing. So things might change over the next couple of weeks with his match with Archer. MJF and CM Punk are supposed to be having a match coming up. Maybe Cody's contract thing will end up with him versus Hangman at Revolution. Maybe Cody will, say, if you want me to sign a new contract, I want the stipulation where I was not allowed to fight for the world title. I want that gone. I want Hangman for Revolution. And that, I think, would propel Hangman back up because Cody, say what you will about him, he keeps himself relevant with his weird stuff. So maybe that'll be the case. Hey, maybe Cody will show up at the Rumble, make a one-off appearance there, and then go back to AEW. And then it'll give him all the buzz, and then he'll bring Hangman along for a title match at Revolution. How cool would that be? That'd be cool. I don't know. You tell me. Let me know in the comments. Let's move on here. Let's take some other questions. We're already 6 minutes deep into this thing. Let's see here. Shiny or Shinny says, okay, so this is probably the question that is asked the most here at WrestleJuice because the questions are on everybody's mind. He says, love all the videos recently. Thank you. He says, how long do you see AEW lasting? Do you ever see a point where AEW and WWE would meet in the ratings? Yeah, I mean, dude, they're already almost matching Monday Night Raw in the demographic number. They're still a ways off in the total viewership. But yeah, I think it's possible within 3 years that AEW could potentially match WWE, depending on where people go, depending on how contracts go down, what kind of effort WWE starts putting in. If they really have a creative turnaround of some sort, maybe they'll start pulling away again. Maybe they'll start getting over 2 million. But the trajectory of WWE ratings over the past 5-10 years has always been down. AEW is a new thing. It hasn't burnt out a lot of its fans on stuff. And so it's still sort of on the upswing. We'll see if the two can meet at some point in the future. I think it's possible. I don't think it's guaranteed. WWE is a company that's worth 10 times more. 10 times more than AEW. They should be able to pull away pretty quickly, but you got Vince in charge and he does all sorts of crazy stuff with the booking. Sean Williams, would you ever consider doing some kind of series on your channel mainly focused on your art? He says he thinks my art's pretty cool. Thank you very much, Sean. I appreciate that. I don't know. Maybe. I do my art for fun. I did some art videos in the past. They're here on the channel. You can look them up. I think I called them Friendo Workshops. Yeah, I don't know. It's a possibility. It's just sort of a personal thing. I just sit there, watch TV and do artwork. I'm not sure how much. I don't even know how well it would do if I plunked down and did it. It's pretty simple stuff, but I appreciate the sentiment. I might be publishing a sketchbook, like a little comic book version of all my sketches here in the near future. I might do that soon. So I don't know. Maybe that'll tickle that particular itch. Lick asks, what do you think Vince McMahon's legacy as a wrestling promoter will be? Will he be looked at fondly for making so many big moments and stars, or will he be the guy who killed wrestling as a valid mainstream entertainment platform with the corny BS? Okay, no, it's definitely not going to be the second part. I think that there will be a bit of an asterisk next to his name or some sort of stain of his legacy, mainly because of his business practices. But at the end of the day, we don't even know a lot about that stuff behind the scenes. And when those books are written eventually, it'll be too little too late to really put too much of a tarnish on his legacy. He will be the man who popularized professional wrestling, sports entertainment, what you want to call it. He is the man who brought it to us in the mainstream decades and decades ago, who nationalized it, regardless of how he did it. He's the man who did it, and he's the man who gave us the golden era of wrestling, Hulk Hogan and all them, and or the rock and wrestling era, whatever you want to call it. And then, of course, he gave us the Attitude Era and John Cena. I think that he's going to be remembered. Yeah, usually, honestly, when people's contributions are like equal parts, like, oh, wow, look, they did a bunch of really cool stuff. Oh, they did some shitty stuff, too. Usually, they're glorified. Usually, history remembers them kindly. Look at Ronald Reagan, for example. So, yeah, I think he's going to be remembered as a god of wrestling, or at least a god of the pro wrestling business. God of wrestling as JBL. And I think he's going to be remembered as a huge figure in pro wrestling, never to be matched. So yeah, I think that that's going to be his legacy. And I think there's very little he can do to stop that from happening, unless there's like one of those crazy like Cosby-esque things where he's like a big scumbag and that comes out and people give a shit all of a sudden. Masked Man says, what do you think is more important, which is entirely possible. What do you think is more important in a wrestler in the wrestling sports entertainment business if they can't be good at both? Mic skills, being able to grip and pull in the audience with their words, or being a good wrestler and having great matches, telling their story in the ring? Connecting with the audience is number one. That matters more than anything. I feel like if you take, for example, I'm just going to throw this name out there, The Miz, right? He gets shit on a lot. But that guy knows how to connect with the crowd, usually as like a heel. But like, I feel like The Miz, who really isn't that great of a wrestler, like he's really safe and that's fine, but he's really boring as a wrestler, has achieved a much higher level of success in his career than like a Cesaro, who's an amazing wrestler. But that dude cannot connect on the microphone with the crowd at all. Never has been, and he probably never will be. I'm sorry if you don't like hearing that, if you're a big fan of Cesaro, but the man just doesn't have a lot of that sort of charisma that you need to connect with the crowd. But he's an amazing wrestler. The Miz is kind of a shit wrestler. He's just boring. But he really knows how to do the sports entertainment thing, the microphone thing, the connecting with the crowd thing. He knows how to do that. So I think, honestly, I think that's sort of the big thing. When people remember stuff, they remember the characters. They remember the connection with the audience first, mostly, and then they remember the work rate stuff, the wrestling stuff. You need the mic stuff in order to get through in professional wrestling, really to break through. Let's see here. DJ Luke D says, can we consider Brock one of the greatest of all time? Yup. Yeah, absolutely. Are you kidding me? Yes. The man has it all. He's got everything in the ring. He's the most dominant guy of his gen. I mean, you can call him whatever you want. You can call him the Shaq. You can call him the Kobe, the Gretzky, the Babe Ruth, whatever you want to call him. Brock is the man. Absolutely. The fact that he went and did it in the UFC legitimately and came back to wrestling and dominated, broke the Undertaker streak, was the longest reigning this, that, the other. Yeah, Brock is definitely greatest of all time. Let's see here. John Davies. Hi, Steve. Hi. Playing devil's advocate, do you think WWE's strategy over the last few years has made them a more saleable asset and is actually good business sense? He means releasing wrestlers on inflated contracts, changing developmental to be more consistent with the main roster, such as 2.0, and establishing / controlling their own wrestling names / IPs. He references Gunther here. Yes and no. So I think some of the things you've mentioned probably make them a more saleable asset. Releasing people, playing the game of, hey, let's hoard a bunch of talent because we don't want our competition to get it and we want to be the end-all be-all in wrestling. That was a philosophy they changed when Nick Khan came along and said, listen, in order to be a saleable asset to a high bidder, you don't need all this bloat. You don't need to be the end-all be-all in wrestling. So stop trying to be that. And then they release like thousands of people, thousands of wrestling into the world. I know I'm exaggerating. Tons of people into the world. He leans them down. He chops them so that they're a focused content creation house. They change people's names to make sure that if they go elsewhere, that the elsewhere can't capitalize on what they did in the WWE. Those are actually probably smart business moves, I'll be honest with you. But the key thing here is it's a fictional program where you can script out your stories but still maintain like a sports thing. So imagine if you're like Adam Silver in the NBA, right? And you're like, man, we haven't created any new superstars. There hasn't been another LeBron James that's come around, that's or Kobe Bryant that's really like captured the zeitgeist the way these guys have. What if you can invent that? What if you can script the LA Lakers beating the New York Knicks, two juggernauts, two powerhouses, the two biggest markets in the country every single year in the NBA Finals? Wouldn't you do that? And wouldn't your ratings skyrocket? They would. WWE has the potential to do something similar to that, right? Right now, they're getting billion-dollar deals off of their TV rights. Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics said this best. It is entirely possible that they have left $2 billion deals on the table. Had their creative and total viewership not taken a plummet over the last 5, 10, whatever years, maybe they could have increased their market cap, their stock price, the value of their company, and the licensing fees that they're able to charge because they can write their own I almost said density like George McFly. Destiny. They can control their own destiny, and they haven't been able to do it. So, yeah, I do think that there are some moves that they've made since Nick Khan has come aboard that we might not like. We might think, oh, it's terrible. How can you leave money on the table to go? But releasing people that you don't need is probably a good business move. Probably. Now, the fact that they can't figure out how to make money with a Keith Lee, with an Aleister Black, with an Andrade, et cetera, the fact that they can't figure out how to do that is a problem, and that creative black hole might be why they're leaving a lot more money on the table if their viewership was double what it is right now. I think that's a distinct and very likely scenario. You might disagree with me, but that's how I feel. Ron asks, do you feel there would have been a way to book babyface Diesel for a long reign that would have kept the fans on his side, or was he simply too big and too generic as a good guy? Of course there was a way to book Diesel for a long reign that made all the fans like him, because they did it in WCW. You just make him himself. Kevin Nash is a super cool guy. You just sort of make him himself. And then when you have other wrestlers, I mean, look, I know the business was crap in 1995, but it's also because the product was crap. It ain't, like they could have done something about that. Again, they could have written their own density. So, yeah, I think WCW actually got Kevin Nash pretty darn right. I think trying to make him into somebody who he wasn't, Diesel, a truck person, apparently. If they had just gone the route of WCW, maybe, and I know they kind of did that a little bit, but yeah, I think at that point in 95, if they would have tried to capture a little bit of the sort of Gen X vibe, the Gen X zeitgeist of like, because that's what him and Hall were. They were just two guys who came in and they sort of didn't give a shit. Like in character, they were like, yeah, whatever, fuck this place. We're the NWO. We're going to take it over, or maybe not. And that was Nash's vibe, and it was awesome. It was really cool, and that was just sort of the thing back then. People loved people who didn't give a shit. That was popular. And in WWE, it was still like, oh, these cartoon characters all care about stuff. So that's what I think. Raz G asks, do you think AEW now would benefit with the streaming deal like at Netflix or HBO Max, or reach out to non-wrestling audiences? If so, how? I don't know that getting into a streaming deal with like a Netflix or an HBO Max would reach more of an audience, because they're already on cable television. You have people literally flipping channels. You have lead-ins like Big Bang Theory and I guess sometimes NBA games or something. I think that reaching a new audience, I mean, you get on Netflix or HBO Max, you've got like a million things in front of you. That's just going to blend in with the rest of the crowd. So I don't see any benefit there as opposed to what they're doing right now. So I kind of feel like at this point, no, probably not. Let's see here. We'll end on this one. The Hound 316. I got into an argument with one of my buddies because he has Big Show as number 7 on his best of all time list, and Eddie Guerrero gets an honorable mention. He asks, what's the worst wrestling take you've ever heard by one of your friends? Oh man, I don't know if any of my friends have had any like really, really bad takes. I know my personal worst wrestling take that I take back is back when I said that I felt like Bret Hart was a super overrated champion. I look back and I think that he wasn't the greatest promo in the world, but clearly he was widely influential, and people like Bret Hart quite a bit. So yeah, that was probably my worst take back then. So yeah, I'll leave on that one. We'll answer some more of these questions another time. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Hey, by the way, Royal Rumble is coming up tomorrow. I'm going to be live over at twitch.tv/Steven Larson to watch it with Larson and the Enforcer. So go join us. Should be a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll see you there. In the meantime, she's back. She's right there. Look at her right there. There you go. There's your shot of my sleeping dog. So go check out this video over here. She's just sleeping. I'm just talking really loud, and she's just sleeping. So thanks for watching, everybody. Until next time, we'll talk to you later. He's a good girl. I can't even tell if she's awake or not.